Good afternoon, everyone. As people start to trickle in, we will start with our impact video, and we'll join you right after this.
It's the mission of the Urban Land Institute to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact. That's what we do at ULI Toronto. Our members work in all aspects of land use.
ULI is a catalyst. It's a catalyst for people who in themselves are thought-provoking, are interesting, they're purposeful, they're engaged, and they want to have an impact on the world.
The Toronto region is definitely a stronger, more robust place because of the championship role that the Urban Land Institute Toronto has played in elevating the status of women in the industry.
Our industry has a responsibility to meaningfully contribute to the social fabric of our communities and to be a climate change leader.
In Toronto, ULI helps deliver climate change and resiliency that is equitable and valuable.
ULI Toronto help mid-career professionals reach the next stage of their careers as city builders.
ULI Toronto is an entry point and a launching pad for our next generation of leaders to find their place in this very complex industry.
ULI Toronto brings global best practices to our city and shows our city's innovations to the world of real estate.
ULI creates really good conversations about important public policy subjects for our members.
It brings leading developers across our city together to wrestle with the crisis of affordability. We need solutions for our industry, tenants, and new home buyers alike.
The ULI network is incredibly effective in bringing in key stakeholders to build solutions to support Black communities.
I'm proud to work alongside ULI in seeking to accelerate accessibility and ensure that our built environments meet everyone's needs for access.
ULI Toronto is well positioned to help the real estate and development industry identify opportunities to meet a generational need to advance truth, justice, and reconciliation. ULI demonstrates the unique power in leveraging the built environment, whether that's private real estate development or public infrastructure, for the benefit of a more competitive and equitable city.
I am so excited as ULI Chair to celebrate these positive solutions that our real estate development community has brought forward for Toronto.
At ULI Toronto, we connect, we inspire, and we lead.
Thank you. Welcome back. That ULI impact video is an invitation for you to get more involved in the world's largest and most active ULI chapter. A few notes just to those of you who are members or not yet members, that there are things like behind the paywall, global membership directory, an incredible resource to connect you to the global network of ULI. We also invite you to join our ULI committees through the Navigator portal, which is our annual window that opens up each May. But if you are a sponsor company, we are also intaking committee members throughout the year. And you can find out about past attendees of our events, a great networking tool. And finally, Knowledge Finder, which is an incredible resource of case studies and other information in our database going back to the 1940s globally. That is a wealth of knowledge that might be of advantage to you in your work. You'll also notice that ULI is significantly increasing our member-only programming, including tours and educational opportunities, as well as the weekly roundup newsletter of industry stories that you cannot afford to miss, as well as a single source of all upcoming ULI Toronto programs. If you only have time to open up one ULI email a week, this is the one. Also a new monthly breakfast series featuring senior public officials. Our next breakfast is with Michael Kraljevic, chair of the Ontario Land Tribunal this December. And in January, we have Jag Sharma, Deputy City Manager, Development and Growth Services at the City of Toronto, Phil Verster in February, CEO of Metrolinx. And finally, in March, we have Michael Fetishin, CEO of the new Building Ontario Fund, and more to come. So these are incredible member-only opportunities for you. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Joy, Executive Director of ULI Toronto, and welcome you to day 2 of our special 5-part lunch series during this National Housing Week, broadening the affordable housing discussion. Before we get into this, as always, we begin with a land acknowledgement. As a Toronto-based organization, we acknowledge that the land that we are meeting on virtually is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. We'd also acknowledge and honor those who've come here involuntarily, particularly descendants from those who were brought here through enslavement. To better understand the meaning behind this land acknowledgement, we recommend programs that we'll be posting in the chat that take you to our webpage. I usually speak a little more to the meaning behind this land acknowledgement. It's not just something that we read. I did so yesterday and I will do so later in the week, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to thank our annual sponsors. Today's event and all other ULI programming would not be possible without the support of ULI's annual sponsors. We would like to express our gratitude to all of these sponsors for that support. Now more than ever, ULI relies on the support of our sponsors to put on high-quality programming, to drive our mission, to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. To all of them, we say thank you. Okay, let's shift to today's program. Once again, day 2, how can real estate industry innovate? To lead this discussion, I am pleased to turn the program over to someone who's well positioned to explore this question, George Karas, founder and CEO of R Labs. Before I bring George in, I'll say that we hope we'll have time for audience Q&A. Recognize that we often get squeezed for time as we did yesterday, but we will do our best to accommodate some questions. So please put them through the chat. And also that the moderator and speaker bios will be posted to the chat so that we can economize on time a little bit with respect to introductions. So with that, George, over to you.
Well, thank you, Richard. Hello, ULI. Hope you're having some good mind food here for your lunch. Great to be a part of National Housing Week, and really excited to talk about how the real estate industry can and is innovating. Great to have an excellent group of panelists here with Jeff, with Chris, with Gabriella, and Michael here. And so as Richard mentioned, I'll run a show here. I'll set the stage a bit with a little PowerPoint presentation, have a discussion, and this is not a spectator sport. So we're going to get you involved in a little bit of a poll partway through, and then have some Q&A at the end. So thank you again, and let me begin and with a bit of background and share some slides here for you. So hoping everyone can see a screen here. I'm assuming that's the case.
Yeah, we can see. We're good.
Okay, good. Okay, so just to kick off, and it's kind of the need. Let's start about that. Like, we need an opportunity for innovation in real estate and housing. Housing is something we are literally all in together: industry, consumers, and government. It operates in a policy framework, and if you look very carefully in that policy framework, you will see that no one is actually in charge. That creates this very problem-rich environment that we are now operating in, which many people are calling a crisis. And when we look at the goal of what we're trying to do, a gift that was kind of created by CMHC on the right here about 2 years ago, we need, Canada, about 5.1 million homes over the course of 8 years. That's the blue line in the right graph. When we look at an actual delivery of housing over a trailing 8-year period, or about a 70-year period since 1955, see that dark blue line on the bottom. And so what we can clearly see here is that there's nothing incremental that's going to get us to that target. In fact, then the size of the problem, when you look at it in the inverse, is the size of the opportunity. And so the size of innovation here in real estate and housing is about 3 times the size of the existing industry. But it's not just about having the number of housing being 3 times. We also have to make that new housing affordable across the housing continuum. It has to be sustainable, and it has to be resilient. So the innovation need and opportunity here is huge. When we look at the innovation muscle of our industry, we actually have to take a very sobering look at this. And this is some work that was done back in 2019 with PwC and with RealPAC around measuring innovation muscle through R&D spend in the industry. And you can see benched against other industries, it's pretty low. Now, there's 2 takeaways to this. One, because the innovation denominator of our industry is so small, anything that we do on the numerator here is going to create an outsized outcome. The second takeaway here is industries, and we can see this now, on the other side of pandemic, industries that have a high degree of innovation muscle in times of crisis can do remarkable things. Example, Moderna, the company Moderna, which was actually created out of a venture builder in Boston called Flagship Pioneering, focused exclusively on bio and life sciences. So when we look at innovation through the lens of a corporation, it is actually a very strategic enterprise value strategy. And on the left here, you can see a McKinsey framework around a corporate strategy and these kind of 3 horizons of the corporation. The core business of the corporation, Horizon 1, emerging businesses of the corporation, which nurture the core, a little faster, a little cheaper, and Horizon 3, entirely new businesses. Now, a Darwinianly successful organization must invest in all of these 3 horizons. And typically, that asset allocation, strategy is asset allocation, is about 90% of assets in your core, 8% of assets to nurture that core, and 2% of those in entirely new models. Very important. And so how this works from a corporation's perspective is major corporations must partner with small entrepreneurial teams to try new things and pilot new things. And that's important because it's not to say that real estate has its Kodak moment where it's all going to go away. But it is true to say that a lot of the future value has yet to be created. So how does an organization invest in innovation? And by doing that, it's its people, it's technology, it's its cash. It does it in 2 ways. The first way is as R&D, and that's off of its P&L. And as you saw here before, this is a very hard model, and the real estate business model is not rewarded for investing in R&D. So it can't do it off of the P&L. So how does it do it? Well, it can do it off of the balance sheet. And off of the balance sheet, there's 2 ways to invest in innovation. One is venture investing, and the other is venture building. Now, about 95% of all ventures are standalone. Means you're the entrepreneur with the technology, or you're the money with the ideas. You're at one end of the equation or the other. The truth is 80 to 90% of those fail, and they fail here for these kind of orange reasons. Structured company building is very small. It explains about 5% of ventures that exist. 1 out of 2 will fail. And they fail because you've de-risked some of those areas. So you have a 5 times higher probability of success in structured building than in standalone venture. Now, venture building is a bit of an innovation in innovation. Let me give you the construct around how does it normally work. Well, an entrepreneur really faces this obstacle course, that has to happen before they can create a material entity. Define the concept, validate it, get some traction, scale, and then get some predictable scale. Now, there's artifacts and there's platforms along the way. Incubators help make it up to make it real. Accelerators help you make it real to make it grow. There's money, seed, growth, and if you really hit it, private equity. Venture building isn't any one of those things. It's in fact all of those things. And what's unique here in Canada is that as those who are focused on problems in real estate and housing go, there is an ecosystem now that's formed and growing around them that bring all the components that are needed in this area. And that's actually the real estate industry venture builder. It's a unique partnership that has no duplicate anywhere in the world, ingests problems, and through this partnership, moving through ideation, through validation, genesis, pilot, and so on. At the other end of this, new housing solutions through new born global companies that create new jobs of higher productivity. So in the last 6 years, 35 ventures. Ventures are companies that are missing a few things, maybe some of you. And companies here that we've got 5, and we're really pleased to have 2 of our CEOs here with us today to talk about the innovation journey. As an industry, we had our crisis-opportunity moment back in 2022, where we said, hey, what if together we created an innovation agenda as an industry? In 2023, the industry got together and actually did something which has never been done before anywhere in the world. Stood up an agenda this year with 5 areas of focus, key crunchy ones: affordability, supply, low carbon and resiliency optimization, and then 4 areas of action that could go to work on this: engaged innovators, active investors, expanding the innovation ecosystem. And so that was put in place this year. And then looking ahead into next year, question was, what's the one thing that can achieve progress in all 5 areas of focus? And that is the industrialization of housing in Canada. This is a big deal. And this is everything from trees to keys, and everyone has a role in this. And in October of this year, the forestry industry, the advanced manufacturing industry, the real estate industry got together and created the innovation map around this ecosystem. And this is going to be, I think, extremely important to how we deal with that broader innovation in real estate and housing in Canada in the years, decades ahead. One of the things that's important about this is doing new things. Doing new things is important. We're going to need to do a lot of them. How do we do this? Anytime you bring something new into a population, you get this breakdown of that population. What we need here are new innovators that are bringing these innovations to the market, and we need early customers for some of these. Those we refer to as real innovators, and we're going to need a lot more of them. And hopefully, with some of you that are here on the webinar today, can identify whether you think you are one, because we're going to need them. So speaking of real innovators, it's my pleasure now to sort of turn it over to a discussion here with my esteemed panel. So very pleased to have Gabriela Sakari here from Create Toronto, Jeff Cape with Assembly, Chris Godsell with NOAA, and Michael Sutherland here with Hatch. So without any further ado, I think we're now off screen share and we're all together. So to my panelists, just as by way of introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and why innovation in real estate and housing is important to you. Now I'm going to go across here, and I see Jeff here is my immediate right. So maybe Jeff, if you could kick us off, please.
Yeah, so my name is Jeff Cape. I'm the CEO of Assembly, and I suppose I'm a disruptor deep down and an entrepreneur through and through. In this particular case, the housing agenda, of course, is the centerpiece of our work, and so the focus of Assembly is on designing a strategy for how we bring modular, which has a certain stigma attached to it, maybe driven by some of the historical attempts in this area, but trying to find ways to leapfrog the opportunities and the challenges here in Canada, and basically designing partnerships with global best-in-class, working with some Swedish leaders in this space to bring a modular program to the housing agenda for mid-rise and wood housing products in Canada.
Thank you, Jeff. Gabriela.
Hello, I'm Gabriela Sakari. I'm with Create TO. We are an agency of the City of Toronto, created in 2018, and really to lead a citywide real estate service delivery model. We work with our city partners across a variety of different fronts to de-risk essentially property and deliver on city building objectives. And a major component of the work that we've been doing over the last number of years is on affordability and delivering affordable housing pursuant to sort of the city's objectives, both in the transformational report by this current administration and also aligned with other key objectives like Transform TO and sustainability. And it was within that framework that I think innovation and building, I know it's a common term, but toolbox that allows us to leverage city assets to deliver on those objectives in ways that are perhaps traditional and have been tested and true, but also in pushing the envelope to look at other means and other components that we can, or tools we can put in the box to actually deliver faster and better and build to scale.
New tools. Thanks, Gabriella. Chris, would you give us your view, please?
Thanks, George. I'm so glad to be here. The subject of innovation is near and dear to my heart. I've been privileged to build this would be the fourth organization that I've been a founder of, and as the CEO and co-founder of No Intelligence, we are looking to bring innovation to the problem of flooding, especially in urban environments. I think when we think about affordability, we also have to remember that people can't afford flooding of their properties at the rate that we're looking at. So this summer, when there was $940 million of insured claims in Toronto within a 3-hour storm, we have to remember that 2 or 3 times that was probably damage was caused, because most people don't actually file insurance claims for property damage. So we need to build innovation around understanding flood risk, building affordable and achievable flood defense strategies, and implementing those strategies so that people who own property or manage property can become flood resilient. And that's what No Intelligence is all about. That's how we fit into the affordability agenda around housing.
Thanks, Chris. So we've heard housing, we've heard flooding. Michael, maybe you can bridge some of those gaps for us.
Sure, thanks, George. And I'm, for those of you that don't know me, pleasure to be on the panel here. And I'm with Hatch, and Hatch is a 10,000 person, privately held, proud to be private, employee-owned global company, homegrown in Canada. We have 3 businesses: metals and industrials, energy, and infrastructure. And we call ourselves entrepreneurs with a technical soul. So we love getting involved in doing messy, big problems. And the big problems of the world we see are urbanization, climate resiliency, and decarbonization. We gotta stick to 1.5 or at least 2 degrees Celsius. I work with a group called Urban Solutions, and so it's interesting. It bridges sort of my own personal history, work with public sector and private sector. I did a decade in the public sector doing stuff with Metrolinx around, I think some would say was disruptive around creating big projects, and then in consulting, I get to work with the public sector and private sector at the intersection of land and infrastructure. And so really, in short, I think bringing together all of these things is going to help us solve the housing supply, housing affordability challenge. And so, we can talk about, better infrastructure, better transit systems, better multimodal systems, better water systems, things that, overall systems that deliver more value at less cost and less footprint. Being better at delivery. I mean, a big part of Hatch is we work on big projects and work right through the delivery. And of course, that means cost and time. And so it's really interesting to talk more with George and Jeff and others in the lab about, what their focus is on delivering housing. But I mean, think about any asset. I mean, that's an opportunity. And then the other thing I just want to flag is this idea about, spatial and complete community building, and how, not just affordable, but livable. So, a quick example would be if households don't need 3 cars or 2 cars, but they can get off on 1 car or 0 cars. That's also a contribution to housing affordability, because you're just making life more affordable. And so, we'll talk more, I'm sure, about new venture creation, but also, how do we evolve existing practices at big corporates or government? And obviously, there's lots of places for the group on this panel to talk about how we can shake up all that.
So I love the entrepreneurs with the technical soul, by the way. So innovation hurts. Like, innovation is not easy. We should be very clear about that. And so let's go back into some specifics here and go back on each of your unique points here. Best examples from where you've come from, where you are now, and perhaps where you're going, of innovation in your organization. What was the problem? How did you innovate? Maybe give us some color on your experiences, and maybe come back to you, Jeff, to start us off.
Yeah, and maybe just picking up on your point about systems, that why it's hard to innovate. I mean, and the idea that might be evident in the numbers you've characterized, George, would be that the construction and real estate industry is filled full of a bunch of old dogs who don't understand how to deal with new tricks, and there's possibly some truth to that. Although I think a more specific truth would be that the construction and real estate industry generally rejects innovation. And why does it reject innovation? I mean, it is an extraordinarily long game to see returns in this space. It requires deep pockets. It is stuffed full of risk. And so the system, whether it be financing models or legal structures, just seems to net out all of the risk. It just kind of pushes it to the edges, which means that innovation, anybody who tries to break the system is kind of shut out. And unlike the tech industry, for instance, or maybe pharma, where innovation is broadly welcome because that's where the big revenue streams emerge. But real estate is very different that way. And so, the innovation agenda for us as a company has been driven by the idea that the current structure is broken, and that the requirement for a fundamentally different way of delivering the elements, the critical building blocks to a construction site, needs to change. And that's really using a model that's maybe somewhat inspired by the auto industry, or maybe by IKEA or Lego, to use kind of more tangible pieces. This idea that you could build substantial portions of the building off-site under more controlled environments, and bring those pieces to the site and put them together more efficiently on site, where you control the ingredients, you control the work environment, and you bring it to the site in a much more comprehensive, completed form. And in so doing, reduce the risk, which is one of the things the industry wants to see happen. Control costs, which is another thing that the industry, banks, insurance folks want to see happen. But for whatever reason, it hasn't emerged quickly and effectively. And so we currently are pushing hard to put that kit of parts, that digital library of parts, together with a manufacturing program to see it possible. And so we built almost 9 projects now, and we have another 10 or so in construction right now. So that the lessons learned in doing the work and actually executing on the ground has been unbelievably informative in telling us how to iterate our model and how to fine-tune our working relationship with supply chain and partners and banks, for that matter. And so far, so good. I mean, it's showing promise. The scaling strategy for us next is to bring a factory into our program, and working with a Swedish company called Lindbacks out of northern Sweden, who are recognized as the kind of number 2 or 3 of the world, is the fastest and easiest way to bring that forward.
How's Sweden's maybe get some color on like the Swedish context there, Jeff?
They're 30 years ahead of us, and why isn't entirely clear to me, other than maybe to recognize that they have that kind of Germanic mindset where they want to control and de-risk and organize the pieces efficiently. Sweden does have IKEA, and it does have Saab, and a kind of aerospace industry. So there are those pieces, whether it's some weird combination of IKEA and the aerospace industry merge to kind of create the innovation in housing. But yeah, they are 30 years ahead. They are comprehensively organized around offsite manufacturing. Over 90% of all their residential housing is put together in offsite factories that create a much higher quality product that is cheaper and more quickly put in place in cities. And so they are the desired solution of banks and consumers, not the second tier thing that you go to if you don't have enough money to.
Right.
You know, it's actually what people want. And so the success there is real. And so that's fundamentally why we are going to work with Lindbox to put our own program together, because, well, back to innovation, I love to kind of break new ground. Love it, but I prefer to work with somebody who's done that already.
Before.
And, yeah, much easier. Thank you.
And speaking of done it before, Gabriella, why don't we over to you? Give us your best example of innovation and problem and kind of the growth that took place from that.
So I'm actually going to piggyback off of Jeff, because we kind of took his framework and we actually tried to test tried and true. And it, in particular, as it relates to mass timber, and the innovation we wanted to kind of bring forward was how could you deliver affordability with the kind of sustainable framework that meets the objectives of the city's Transform TO policies. And so we actually, this is typical in the public sector, we piloted, but we actually did that. We undertook a pilot to really compare traditional construction concrete to mass timber. We looked at environmental performance based on the city's TGS standards, as well as achieving performance standards on the embodied carbon to hit those kind of targets and future performance standards that the city will be putting out with respect to decarbonization. So we went through a very exhaustive kind of study, brought it down to kind of data points that we could actually demonstrate. Is there an opportunity to show leadership and to demonstrate innovation in the delivery of affordable housing? We did that successfully with a study with our pilot, and we've now sort of moved on to the next phase, and that is actually how do you execute and actually deliver. And so we have a first site that we are continuing our pilot at Dundas and Ossington, a 10-story mass timber building. We have secured the necessary kind of zoning approvals now to kind of bring it to the next stage. And so the further innovation in this particular project, not only from a construction and delivery model, but the city is also wants to take leadership in actually developing a city builder model where they take on construction, they own the asset, and then they partner with a not-for-profit. So all sort of new sort of territory, I think, for the city,
Innovation.
but effort to innovate, to do two things. One, to demonstrate it's possible and viable, and to lead and show leadership. But then I think the second component is to really actually scale it up. So similar, Jeff, to your notion is you test, you try, but we want the ability to be able to say we can do it here. And what does it look like when we start to bring 2 to 3 sites together?
Right.
And how do you scale it up so that we deliver quality, affordability at scale that is both sustainable and creates livable spaces for people to call home. So successfully, I think, managed the first pilot, and now we're into real execution. Our work is also has a strong kind of financial modeling underneath that underpins our work. So we continue down that track with the effort of having shovels in the ground.
It's, I mean, great to hear. I mean, it's not just the physical, I mean, this housing as a product, this industrialization of housing, but it's also kind of the innovation of the business models that you're also pushing on, which is part of this journey. And so let me segue over, thank you, Gabriella. And so let me segue over to Chris. So it's like, we're talking about housing, because your point earlier, we need infrastructure. We've got to make sure the housing we're creating is resilient. Over to you, in the NOAA seat, maybe you can talk a little bit about innovation and problem and the experience so far and what you're doing.
Well, thanks. Flooding in Toronto suffers from a chronic general problem around the world, which is that billions of dollars have been spent trying to understand flood risk, but as soon as severe rainfall interacts with the built environment, then all the best flood models in the world, all the best climate analytics in the world become inaccurate to the point where they're virtually useless. Because when water collides with the built environment, it starts to behave in ways that require a different understanding of whether you have a flood risk or not at your property level. And for property owners, they need to know what's the risk and what can we do to defend ourselves. They need to know that also because the problem is that your property becomes very expensive to insure and maybe even uninsurable.
Uninsured.
If you don't understand the risk at a level, not only in today's lens, but what's the risk in 5 years, 10 years? A dynamic changing climate means that we need to have dynamic, accurate tools to understand risk and to plan for affordable defense strategies and affordable response. So the problem is clear. For me to go talk about innovation and the best example of it, I'm going to go back a little bit to the company that I co-founded and led before this, where we brought physical simulation to the world of computer graphics. And we brought it to our very first customer, Sony. And what we were doing was so much better than what they were producing, that the physical results were so much better than what they could produce, that they had really come to the end of a journey in their innovation cycle for using computer graphics to represent reality, that they needed physics-based simulation to cross the divide and to get to the accuracy that would deliver on their business model. We're bringing the same view to the world to flooding, that physical simulation of a sewer shed and a built environment of stormwater management systems in the urban environment is the only way to create the kind of accuracy that we need. And are we building our AI strategy? Yes. And a generative engineering strategy? Yes. It will all be built around understanding the physical reality of how your property is behaving when 100 millimeters of rain hits it or 200 millimeters of rain hits it. When we understand that risk, we can build affordable defense strategies. But if we don't, we're going to end up with families like last year who didn't just have one flooded basement event that cost them $50,000. They had two. 100-year storms, it's an obsolete concept. This is not a standard anymore. The United States Weather Service doesn't use it any longer because it's not relevant. So we need to be able to simulate what future climate risk looks like as it pertains to flooding. And that's the biggest innovation that NOAA's bringing to the table. And then I would say from a business model perspective, creating a multi-stakeholder view of how that risk impacts your business, whether you're a condo manager, homeowner, whether you're a REIT, a large commercial property owner, we can help you to understand the risk and plan for defense in a way that's affordable. And we kind of see the world as 150% of the value at 20% of the cost. That's kind of how we apply physical simulation to this complex problem of flooding.
We've got this industrialization supply chain from Jeff. We've got some innovative business models, from Gabriella. We've got pluvial infrastructure modeling. Michael, connect the dots. You talked about livable cities. What did you give some examples of innovations that you are going through, pain stories or success stories that have come out of that?
Oh, thanks, George. Yeah. I guess I kind of want to end with a question back to Chris, actually, but I'll say, one of the pain and success story is bringing concepts that we've seen. We've all traveled, we've all been tourists. You go to places and say, why don't we have that at home?
It's a really good
point.
Why
don't they do X, Y, Z, in place A, B, C? And there's always a good answer. There's always people aren't stupid or, ill-meaning. They do their best. And, there's lots of circumstantial reasons that come together why certain places don't have certain things. But in the end, thinking about this industrialization of housing and even complete community urban design, like one of the things that we see and we complain about a little bit as industry practitioners is the sameness. So I can go to the suburbs of London Paris, Toronto, and I know you guys are going to say those are European cities, are totally different. No, they're not. We're all building the same, like the buildings are starting to look the same. And so one of the things that, you know, we're having very active conversations about, and we're working with some of our clients on, is bringing a sort of a comprehensive view to an entire part of a city and says, well, how do we activate this place? Because everybody, like a couple of years ago, when residential was just going crazy, it was like anybody can make the pro forma on residential work. But the question was, what's your non-residential program? And that sounds easy enough. And in many places, as we know, if you've been to Toronto or walked around a lot of Canadian cities, it's like, well, we put retail at the ground floor and, you know, job done. Well, that doesn't really work because it doesn't create great places and great cities. And it's about the mixing of uses. So I think, you know, there's a challenge ahead of all of us to get that complete community. It's easy enough to say, but it's hard enough to do. But I guess, you know, as an industry, you know, go back to George's point about, you know, real estate generally being less innovative than other sectors. And, you know, why does innovation happen? Well, if it's their day job to innovate and ask questions in a multidisciplinary place, and bring all that together and figure out, well, who your first customer is going to be and who are the second customers going to be, that seems to me really productive. Like, in order to get more innovative, we need to make the conversations more productive and bring the right people into the room faster. And so, Chris, I guess my question, I mean, part of the answer might be, George, what you're creating at our labs, which is faster, more efficient conversations to connect the dots and scale faster, like create that environment. But I'm going to go back to Chris, actually, if I can. George, I don't mean to unseat your job as moderator here, but when you guys were pitching to Sony, was there, it was Sony, right? Yeah. Was that a product dedicated just to Sony, or was that, like, what was the name? And you don't have to go into great detail, but was there a team that was working together for 6 months focused solely on Sony, or was it something else and Sony just happened to be the end user that benefited from, you know, getting this next level of whatever it is, you know, the Tesla Model S that sort of broke the glass ceiling on electric cars, for example, or whatever the analogy is.
I think Sony was ready to listen to a better way. So as an organization, they make acquisitions of innovations, they build them, but they also have the right nervous system set up to respond to innovation, and they're good at it. They're good at acquiring and building innovation and having a hybrid model. They know where they fit. In this case, they knew that they didn't have the capability to replicate what we had already built and what we were about to build in terms of the cost and time and quality. So it made more sense for them to acquire our innovation, to buy it. And I think we were successful at putting together the kind of innovation-based team that you need, which is we're very skilled. The people building this technology, very, very skilled. And we knew how to deliver to the customer. We weren't asking the customer to change the way they behave, the way that their pipeline works, the way that they integrate solutions. And I think with the R-Labs model, one of the really most beneficial aspects of the R-Labs model is that it fills in so many of the gaps that young innovative companies have, with whether it's on being able to prototype and run pilot projects, being able to have the back office and the customer-facing assets, and that younger companies can be distracted by, and then being able to put us in a position now with Noah where we have conversations every day with some of the most sophisticated real estate businesses in Canada. So the R-Labs model is kind of, from my perspective, is replicating so much of what we were good at my previous company, but it took a lot of effort and a lot of time and money to be good at the things that made us possible to deliver the promise to Sony.
So I think what maybe to put a little summary on this thing, I think what Chris so answer your question, timing. You know, when Sony was ready, you know, it was at the right time. And then they had the innovation skill and muscle. And I would just argue here that Canada is ready. Timing is absolutely right. And I think we're taking lessons, and you heard it from Jeff, like, you know, from Sweden. We're actually coming from Japan, they're coming from the US, they're coming from all over right now. And one of the things that we're going to need more of is innovation skills. And so you've heard, so to the audience here, this is time for you to get engaged. So you can put your pizza down and you can get ready to pull, because we're going to need some more innovation skills here. So maybe I'll ask the ULI team to just launch for us a little bit of a poll, because we're going to need some innovation skills in our industry. So the question to all of you is, what would be your preferred means of developing your innovation skills? So let's just give it a second here. Have a look at this, because this, I think, is very important for us to equip an industry of real innovators that are going to be leading the future. The future is not a spectator sport, not for our industry and not for you. So just give that a think. Is it about education and skill building, perhaps with a certification around that innovation credentials? Working with real ventures, you're seeing some of these here. Dedicated conferences, joining a startup, or doing some of these self-paced learning modules and learn as you go. So give that a second. And maybe if I can ask ULI to share those results, please, and see what we see here. All right. Well, this is interesting. This is really interesting. Overwhelmingly, everyone wants to do stuff. You want to learn by doing. I think we have entrepreneurs with a technical soul here. Thank you for sharing, and we'll be able to share this with everyone as well. I'm just thinking, I'm watching our timer. We wanted to get some time for some audience Q&A. So why don't we pause on the closing question panel and maybe see if there's some hand it back to Richard to see if there's some questions from the audience.
Okay. I could come in with some questions. There are a couple. Stephen O'Hagan has asked, first of all, I should say thank you, Jeff. I know you've taken a number of the questions on, and they're in the answered tab. If people want to see the answers that Jeff has offered to some of the questions that have been asked earlier. But Stephen O'Hagan asked a couple of questions related to affordability. So maybe I'll kind of collapse them together if I can. But how, I'll read the first one that he wrote in. How can innovation better address affordability as a key factor in real estate investment when reducing consumer costs is antithetical to the profit motivation model inherent to the land value and attracting investors? Is this limited to reducing material and construction costs, or their appetite for innovation and land costs at the real estate level? So basically, and any similar points in this next question, but where do you see affordability? I mean, reducing costs is one thing, but reducing costs could just simply be increasing profitability. That might be a big motivation. So how can we be sure that, not to say that would be the reason you wouldn't do it, but what sort of guarantors, or how can we be more hopeful that innovation is a way to get to affordability, I guess?
If I can, Richard, and then I'm going to hand it over. I think the one thing that you're hearing and you're seeing right now, like particularly around what Assembly is doing, is the creation of the citizen developer. And I think the citizen developer changes the business model around this, and you're seeing that where it's their land. And the plexes in BC, the ADUs and the missing middle solutions that are here, you're changing the business model here, so people can self-solve their housing needs. Do you want family? Do you need it for income, etc.? So a view of this is that you're actually changing the business model along with the built form. But maybe I'll hand it over to the rest of the panelists to get some input as well.
Okay, thanks, George. No, it's so interesting you just said that, because when we talk about complete community building, we have this great places process, which is basically highly engaged. And it says before you draw anything, go out and do some homework and do some engagement and find out what the community wants and what they're going to benefit from. And let's create a program that meets the need of the community, which is when you're talking about activating complete communities, that's your customer base. It's the people like, walk their dog or whatever. And those kind of communities are what is going to convince people that moving from, and I'll be really extreme here to be, Richard, to meet your ask to be controversial here, to get somebody to move from a 10,000 square foot McMansion into something smaller that is more walkable, takes up less space, is less, and then that works all the way at the other end of the spectrum, where you might be talking about an entry-level person saying like, I feel like there's no community here, so I need some internal space, and I need, private, and I need, 2 TVs or private space. Well, maybe they'll be more comfortable in a, I'm going to be controversial here, maybe they'll be comfortable in a 500 square foot sort of unit that's more efficiently built because their community provides so much more, and they didn't have to buy a car to drive around. So I think that's where you bring together sort of the affordable design, affordable construction, but also complete community building. So the total package is actually more attractive. It's a win-win-win for everyone, even though they might be getting quote unquote less. We have to make less is more.
Jeff, what about you? Just if I could George, push the question. You raised Sweden and they're 30 years ahead. When it comes to affordability, how's that worked for the Swedish market?
I gather it's worked well. I mean, I gather that's one of the hallmarks of their program, right? That it's created affordability and it's increased supply faster. So I think that's been a success. And maybe to interact with one of the other questions out there, which was related to whether government is part of the problem here. An oversized government is creating some of the barriers. And the truth of the matter is that in very many circumstances, yes, that's the case, whether it's slow approval processes or whatnot. But in Sweden, the actual success or the kind of provocation or catalyst for the modular program that's led to a big part of their success, substantial part of their success, was in fact driven by government policy, a big stick in the form of requiring certain performance expectations out of housing. In other words, higher quality housing was one of the requirements, largely related to GHG and carbon footprints. But at the end of the day, that's about a quality product that has a good building envelope and is operationally efficient and whatnot. And the other one was a big carrot in the form of a big pipeline of opportunities. So the governments in Sweden at various levels said, we'll create a pipeline of business for anybody who brings a uniquely innovative solution to the table, and we'll reward you with a multi-year contract that helps create the kind of bankable investment opportunity in the capital equipment to create the production capabilities. In other words, they give a big enough contract to incentivize investments in the capital equipment to create the industrial solution needed. And so government in that sense was part of the solution that's led to the heart of your question, which was higher quality product at a better price.
Well, George, I wonder if I could direct part of the question to Gabriella. In some of the questions, government as a, maybe a frustrator, complicator to innovation has been noted, but is there opportunity? It felt like about a year ago, governments, certainly at the provincial and federal level, were starting to say, we're going to actually demand innovation, whether it's offsite manufacturing, to be part of our procurement process. If we're going to do business with government, if you're going to use our land, you're going to bring in different types of practices. And I feel like over the course of that year, that interest has waned a bit. Is there a role, Gabriella, to maybe have government, through whether procurement or other powers, create more expectation for this industrial strategy that was spoken to earlier in this program?
I actually think there is, Richard, and I think with the work that we're trying to do is one, to demonstrate that it's possible. And I just want to go back to something I think that George also said that is really important, right? And even in the work we do is what is an alternative business model that demonstrates it works? Because at the end of the day, it has to be underpinned by that. And I think government has a role you know, and certainly at the municipal level with the work we're trying to do is to demonstrate, one, that it's possible because we piloted it. And I know it's a word not often liked by many, but it has a business program attached to it. And then there's an opportunity, as you've indicated, through procurement and putting assets out there to say, we want you to come to the table, but we want you to come with innovation. And by the way, we think it's possible because we've done that kind of work. And I think, you know, as the crisis, it kind of continues to intensify, I think it forces and it demands innovation, because we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again because it's not proving to work. And so when I think even within a kind of governance structure is the realization that we need to deliver more faster, continue to meet the objectives of complete communities and resiliency. And so the convergence of that kind of crisis demands innovation. And I think that the setting is emerging, the dots are starting to connect, that we have no other choice if we're going to house people, particularly on the housing front.
And I think maybe just to put a summary on that, I think what Gabriella is saying is, and I think Richard, your observation, I don't think is correct. I think we're actually seeing growing involvement by government bodies or agencies to sort of embrace this as part of this kind of industrialized approach, and sort of various government bodies. And that was a key part to Sweden's success, is that they would encourage, in fact, demand some of that kind of housing on their site. So I think the road ahead here, it's hard to see it when you're in it, I think is very much about the citizen developer and others kind of working with this kind of housing form.
Well, George, I will just say, part of the reason I made that observation about waning interest, and you're saying
I think it's
that
the
perhaps
opposite.
that's not correct, and I'm glad to hear that. But
I think it's the opposite.
I've asked both federal and provincial governments to be involved with us in some programming around how they may be increasing their appetite for innovation in their business dealings, and not been getting a lot of enthusiasm on my side. So let's work together, and maybe we can reset on that idea.
Done.
I want to quickly tuck in a question for Chris, but I'm going to butcher Alex's name. Alex Makizmik. I know I said that wrong. Have municipalities properly mapped out flood risk areas? Are they actively spending capital to mitigate against such events in the future, in your opinion? Noting that Mississauga has recently had an info session, but wondering if this is something, if we should have been more proactive acknowledging capital constraints. And hopefully you understand that question enough to answer. And I got about 30 seconds.
I think the Auditor General has pointed out that municipalities are shorthanded. They don't have the resources to handle the climate risks. And what I can tell you is the president of one of Canada's largest insurance companies, who's visiting with us in a couple of weeks, has 6 million customers, said, we need government to play a role. The insurance companies can play a role. We need private enterprise to show up with solutions and innovations that empower every property owner, whether you're a public landowner or a residential property owner or anything in between, empower them with the resiliency tools. That's the three-legged stool. The governments can't do it alone. And if we focus on insurance companies to solve a problem, or governments to solve a problem, property owners to solve a problem, it won't work. It's very much Noah's brand. We're all in this together.
Thank you. Okay, we are at 12:59. We always end on time, and maybe there'll be a few more slides just to quickly throw up. But I want to thank George, Jeff, Gabriella, Chris, and Michael for a second really important session. We're on a roll here with National Housing Week. Tomorrow, we're setting up an interesting conversation, some tension perhaps around, is rental the new condo? Some would say, yeah, it looks like it. Some would say not so fast. So tune in for that one. Thursday will be a really excellent session as well. We've asked our friends from head office in Washington, D.C. To put together this session, and they're going to talk about how they're approaching affordable housing in the U.S. A lot of different ways than they are here, but maybe some opportunities for us to learn. And then finally, just broadening the toolkit of ideas, a little bit of a catch-all of some of the innovations that we've come across that we wanted to showcase in our final day. And our last slide, it is 1 o'clock. Always a lot of upcoming events. You can see even Ski Day is now up on our horizon for February. So hope to see you at one of these upcoming events. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the day.